some of you might have noticed, this panel is a very interesting combination of individuals who actually are managing GCCs, HR and learning and all of these aspects for GCCs today, as well as a group of people who are not necessarily in GCCs, but do this or work on the area of skilling and capability in a very significant way for their organizations. So it's a very it's a mixed panel, and that's what makes, I think, this discussion a lot more interesting, if you will. I know Shikha also gave us a very interesting challenge to meet up to Alvin Toffler's predictions for the future, which I know will be difficult to cover in 40 minutes, but we will try our best to do what we can. I mean, to be very, as all of you have seen in the last 2 years or so, this whole point of skilling, upskilling, reskilling, etc., has become almost a buzzword. Just for the sake of this conversation today, I did a quick Google search, and Google gave me about 4 million hits in about 0.4 seconds on upskilling and reskilling. And this is just for your interest. Google Books has this whole trajectory where you can check the usage of a word in the last, say, 200 or 300 years. And you will see the usage of upskilling or reskilling being flat for most of our history. And suddenly for the 1980s, it zooms up. And obviously, the last 2 years has been a completely different story. But Google stops at 2019. But the whole point behind all of this is the fact that behind all these buzzwords, behind whatever we are reading in the media, etc., we have 4 people who are actually practicing this on a daily basis and have actually made a difference for either their organizations as HR leaders or for the larger B2C community as people like Bimal and all are doing from NIIT. And therefore, the objective of today's conversation is to sort of peel the onion and look at it from the perspective of what exactly has changed. And given the changes that have happened, some things may not have changed. So what exactly has changed, what things haven't changed, and therefore, basis these, what's the view for the future? So my first question to the panelists, and I will start going around the panel, all of you together, is on what are the things that you've actually seen shift in the last 2 years of the pandemic, and what are the things that you haven't seen shift? So if you don't mind, I'll request maximum 1 minute for each of you, but I'll just go around starting with you. Dimple, you have to unmute yourself.
Sure, sorry, you broke out there. Thank you so much, Deloitte and ET, in hosting this. It's quite a pleasure to see this throughout today. I think, Andy, your question is very pertinent. And, when we speak about pandemic has been a myth-busting exercise for all of us in the whole world. And learning certainly has been at the core face of this in many ways. It is sort of the first cab off the rank, as I call it. What I have seen change is that bite-sized learning is a welcome change with higher adoption against classroom learning. Experiential learning is providing better fulfillment and more aha moments to our colleagues because we've suddenly moved away from classroom learning to full-scale Zoom learning sessions where more people can opt in to learning sessions and learning events. Our colleagues feel more empowered and flexible options of learning are very welcome. So, with the MOOC solutions that we have within organizations and the talent marketplaces that are getting created in supporting project-based learning environments, I think there is a welcome change around that. There is obviously the laser-eye focus, which is the agenda for the discussion today on skills, and I call skills becoming the new guru in everything that is going to happen from this point on and onwards. And the key thing that I'm also seeing is agility and innovation is becoming the name of the game in learning as well, where agility is the pace at which we change with the changing needs of our customers, and innovation is driving this in a way that our colleagues can take away gold nuggets through active immersions and ongoing immersions. Now, what has not changed is the desire to learn from our colleagues, and it's only just increasing more and more. So that is definitely something that we are seeing that is not going away, and it's welcome for that not to go away because we need our colleagues to change. So that would be my perspective, Andy.
Thank you, Dimple. I'll come back to you on the scaling point that you mentioned, but Bimal, your perspectives. You are seeing it from a very different lens already.
No, thanks, Andy. And see, any changes in learning or are really driven by what is happening to the business environment. And really there were 3 forces at play over the last 2 years, more specifically in the context of GCCs. One, of course, was pandemic and everything that was happening from an environment perspective. But having said that, I think GCC industry in itself was going through significant transition in terms of the work and the outcomes that they deliver for their parent organizations, if we can call them so. And thirdly, of course, technology, right? So technology, both from an evolution perspective and adoption perspective. So there was significant changes. So what these three forces did was that, they changed the environment or the setting or the setup in which GCCs were working in terms of office and how the teams were configured. It changed the outcomes that they were supposed to deliver, and it changed how they were supposed to deliver those outcomes. So eventually, what it did to any learning intervention is that all learning interventions have to navigate at least three things. One, the mindset shifts that were required to operate in the new environment. Second is the skill set shifts, and then third is really the tool set shifts. Right. So really, mindset, skill set, and tool set were the three things that any learning intervention had to navigate.
You almost gave me the three subsegments of the next conversation. But thank you for that. Gautam, your perspective on this.
So, firstly, thanks for having me here. I think, learning has now become a strong element of the employee value proposition. It's a strong retention strategy to counter the attrition risk. Right? Growing from within has become a critical success and continuity factor with the rise of no-shows and decline rates that we've seen across the industry for the last 1.5 years. One size fits all, which was often the common approach for classroom-based training, has been jettisoned. Accelerated learning and persona-based programs have pretty much become essential. Training is no longer referred, the word training is almost gone out of the window, right? Now we talk about learning and development. Targeted outcomes, competencies have become the norm. In fact, the learning and development function is very often asked the question, how fast and what next? They are the two questions which keep on getting posed to the L&D, right? I mean, all this contextually is happening because of the fact that for the first time in history, which we've experienced for the last 4 or 5 years, is that the pace of technology development has actually outpaced human capacity to absorb it. And therefore, the only answer lies through rapid and accelerated learning. And we've also had to replace the traditional methods we had of immersion and osmosis, which would naturally occur in an in-office environment. So a lot of change. Like Dimple said, the desire to learn has only increased. I think also the fact that agile thinking, which came into software development many years ago, has actually finally found its way into learning and development as well, which has then resulted in the bite-sized learning, kind of an MVP 0, MVP 1, those kind of approaches.
Absolutely. And Vikram, I'll last go to you for your perspective.
Thanks, Andy. I think it was very well covered already by Dimple, Bimal, and Gautam in that way. Just to add maybe a little more context in terms of how, one, very clearly we saw the whole work environment has changed. And that's become a seed for everything which we have been thinking. And that led to that disruption in jobs and the dynamic need of the learner. And where I'm coming from, this is not only from a corporate perspective, but typically how the apps have become an inherent part of our personal lives also. And therefore, how a typical consumption pattern is getting impacted from a learner perspective, which is there, how people are actually learning from that and therefore changing. And therefore, there was a big paradigm shift in the whole, the L&D learning and development strategies across, and which moved from a pure instructional design to a experience design, which is a holistic experience design if we were to look at it. And this obviously was to keep abreast with obviously the changes in the workplace, workforce, rapid change in technology, making learning how to make it relevant from embracing a digital side as what we said. And therefore we also tried to introduce was something called a Skill City, which was an in-house developed app with a coalition of obviously getting into gamifications to MOOCs to other things. But the whole concept was around how personalization but equally democratization of skills happens, which is instrumental in fulfilling the needs. And I think so other parts we've already covered. So in the interest of time, I think so that's what I just wanted to cover. Thanks.
Thank you, Vikram, for that. I'll come to some of the points that you mentioned because the usage of technology obviously has gone up significantly in enabling this ecosystem, so to speak. But Dimple, I want to come back to you again to start things off. You're obviously looking at a very global financial services landscape that you support is changing very rapidly, and you are talking about the shift from training to skilling. You mentioned skills as a new language. What have you done to make that shift happen? Like, what is the real what really happens to make that shift?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I think it, and you know this, Andy, because we keep talking about it. It is certainly an ongoing battle, in all honesty, around getting your head around what we're really trying to do. That's the first protocol, right? But it's equally a very, very exciting challenge. And the road for the thrill, the adrenaline rush that is coming through this is fascinating in many ways. And if you give me a minute, I'll try and explain that. But we embarked on this journey around a year ago and are completely going to the drawing board on skills, so much so that we are starting to lay the foundational building blocks of the organization in many ways. And how we identify capabilities across our employees inside the organization was the pertinent question that we were dealing with. What are the kind of capabilities that we have across this organization? What are the skills and roles and processes that our employees are really invested in? And how do we really bring them to life? And how do we identify competencies within those capabilities was the pertinent question that we were trying to deal with. And in that, we were obviously going back into identifying which business lines, which pockets, and how does this all link into data and knowledge architecture for our organization. Now, I see this, as I said, as a foundational building block to unlock the potential of skills, and skills being the glue, which means that the future is only about skills, and how do we enable active skill building in the organization. You mentioned financial services, and in it, in GSCs is a fast-changing landscape. We are certainly evaluating what jobs and roles we have today and how they're likely to change in the near term or the mid-term future, and align to them what are the skills needed for these jobs and roles, and break them down at a process breakdown level, as a technology breakdown level. See where are the opportunities of fungibility between those solutions, where competencies can be looked at and skills can really be identified. Our ultimate vision, and we're still on that journey, so it's obviously not achieved, and I think we'll be a bit more on that journey for a little bit over the next 12 to 18 months, I would imagine. Our vision is to unleash the skill-based career pathways, to look at market benchmarks through the lens of skills, to look at job tasting, job enrichment solutions for our colleagues, and to help our colleagues unlock their true potential, both within HSBC and hopefully outside as well, so that skills become the capability matrix that they continue to drive upwards or laterally in their careers and unleash that potential.
Thank you, Dimple, for that. I think the important thing that we want to come back to at some point of time is this whole point of skill-based career pathways that you mentioned, because everybody talks about this as an affair. But the other thing that we've heard, at least I counted some 3 or 4 times, that this word of agility was used in the first round that we spoke. So I want to come to you, Gautam, because you specifically have an experience in technology and use potential agility as well in the whole learning process. What is an agile learning strategy?
Taking off a little bit from what Dimple just said, right? That skill-based career paths. I think that's, to give you an example, I mean, we've enabled learning on demand, right? As opposed to learning when we wanted to do it, right? So now learning on demand is available to our workforce. How have we done that from being earlier on where we would generate a lot of content ourselves? We built up a very strong network of partnerships, right? Partnerships with our technology providers, partnerships with learning providers like Pluralsight, Coursera, Percipio. We can leverage Google and Microsoft and SAP, etc. So we built a network which allows us to enable this learning on demand with obviously licensing arrangement, right? So that's where the agility comes from. Earlier on, the agility came about generating content, populating it, then giving access, going to classrooms, etc. Now you can learn whenever you want to and however you want to, right? Of course, it has to be mapped to a skill-based career progression framework, which is what we've implemented, is a career progression framework which is online. You can map your roles. You can kind of devise your own career path in many ways, and the gaps to a self-assessment. Identify the gaps from how you can proceed from one level to the next, from basic to intermediate to advanced, etc. Right? So that's how we brought in agility. For us now, the whole learning of any individual is actually become a very integral part of that employee lifecycle management, where the teams that were previously, you had recruiting, you had human relations management, and you had learning and development, all pretty much very often operating in silos. Now they all need to get very closely integrated in managing the employee life cycle, of which learning and development is an integral part.
But I wanted to explore this point of agility a little bit more when we speak about different kinds of populations that all of you have in the organizations right now. But before I get into that, Vikram, the other speakers, primarily Dimple and Gautam, fundamentally work with a particular kind of an audience that knows the value of learning for their career development. I would imagine they do to a large extent. Your organization is very different. You are meeting a very large sales force that I guess feels that we know all that there is to know. How do you make learning important? How do you give them the idea that it is an important thing to be able to learn? And therefore, and I'm not just saying Salesforce, but the larger organization, how do you sell the idea of learning?
Okay. No, that's a very good question, Andy, because typically 2 years back and typically when COVID came, COVID obviously was a boon in disguise from a learning platform perspective. So one, we looked at 2-3 things. So one, dynamic skills framework, which was aligned to the business requirements of the jobs, which was there. Second, we operate on a very different philosophy from learning. It's a very open architecture. While skills is a taxonomy, but my whole concept of where personally I wanted to also drive in was, we will not say what is important for what to do, for which skill. We may align it to that, but the whole concept is, it's your choice as a learner, what do you want to do? And therefore, the whole concept of building a democratization of skills where people may attach it to the current job or for future aspirations in terms of whatever they want to learn. And therefore, this whole concept itself draw a lot of pull rather than a push. And we could actually get everything on mobile. And I use it till date when, let's assume COVID has been passed for some time now and in between and tranches also. Our mobile usage for consumption of some of the learning patterns, whether on our internal IPs or on MOOCs or on artifacts, has been actually more than 60% of the consumption. Our adoption rate is 96% of our employees are every month on that, actually, which is there, which itself means that the content also, we've been actually working on workflows on the back end on the recommendation engines. So, and this recommendation engines for everyone, even within in sales, like you touched upon, it's upon each one of us as individuals. And I'm fictitiously speaking, you may want to learn by reading an artifact, which is an article. Dimple may want to get into a simulation, while women may want to get into a peer-to-peer kind of a learning. The whole concept in that whole app is obviously to cover each one of these. And once they start trending onto that, like a Netflix or Amazon, they get their next set of recommendations which they can do. And then the mini size works, the bite-sized learnings in certain way. Also, additionally, what we did was we launched Project Economy in the organization. This Project Economy has taken up very well because around 1,000+ people are actually working on projects which are outside their core domain area. And it's not a push, it's a pull in terms of saying projects which are important for the organization for the current year or for 5 years. And if they are a part of those organizations and make an extra dollar, they earn an extra dollar, or they save an extra dollar, they are partners in terms of getting an award for that. This has really revolutionized in terms of the learning, because the whole concept of only knowing about a particular topic but not implementing it, rather than actually on the go getting into something which, like a ITC ad which used to come, you can do something different which you never know, has really worked well. So One is this, the second is the project economy side, the third is the business hackathons, not the IT hackathons. So we have been doing business hackathons for business problems. So people get then the live simulation environments of obviously getting into it. And more than 5,000 people in a particular days actually, which we appoint, actually get into it. So this whole concept has actually been around how do we create an experience which provides the multitude of content on the go, whenever which is required, also on mobile, not only on laptops. And then in terms of obviously their experience side, which is on projects or otherwise participating in some of the business hackathons, they actually get to experiment it, and therefore democratizing the whole concept which has been there.
Thanks, Vikram. But I think one thing I wanted to do was, it's interesting, we just at the halfway mark of our conversation, and we've so far been taking a view of an organizational view towards it. Right? All three of you have spoken about how do you do it from an organizational perspective. But Bimal, I wanted to, you're looking at the other end of the spectrum as well. You're looking at the learner, you're addressing the learner in many ways. How is the learner looking at things differently today?
So firstly, I mean, if you I'm just glad that the conversation, has moved to skilling. If you look at what Dimple said and Gautam said and Vikram said in a different context, but really it is all about skill. And one big difference between skill and any other form of learning, whether you call it knowledge or whatever, is that skill is something that you have to demonstrate. So like Vikram said, the skill is of a business hackathon where I'm assuming they would probably put them into a sales condition, right? And you have to sell. Right? In a product development environment, you have to code and you have to demonstrate that you can code and create products that the organization is wanting you to create. So I think what that has done from a learner mindset perspective, and that is your specific question, is that learners have become cognizant of this aspect of their ability to demonstrate what they are learning versus learning for the sake of learning or learning for the sake of acquiring knowledge. And hence, I think learners have become very, very conscious of choosing interventions where they can then demonstrate, because they also know that once they are able to demonstrate their ability to become, say, for example, in Vikram's organization, move up the career ladder on the sales side very, very quickly is very high. Similarly, in Gautam's and Dimple's context, to move to more, to more innovation-led projects, or to hire value projects, or hire product innovation projects, or in an organization which is billing its employees, right, like a typical IT services organization, to hire billable projects. There is a direct correlation. So learners today are focused on learning where they can demonstrate and hence leverage that demonstration as part of their career growth.
And I'll start with you again, on this. But hard skills versus soft skills. And I think over the last 2 years, we've realized also the fact that as important hard skills may be, soft skills capability is even more important, perhaps, particularly as you go up in the organization and even at the earlier levels, because you're working a lot more in teams, a lot more virtual, etc. How are you seeing, are people only focusing on the hardest skills, or is the awareness that the need for soft skills is important also coming about?
So, from a relevance perspective, and now I'll shift largely to the organizational view. So from a learner perspective, we spoke, but moving to an organizational view, especially when you speak about soft skills, I think the part that again has got demonstrated is that many of the aspects, and I'll just pick up, say, for example, many organizations have used learning as an engagement, right? We spoke about learning as a tool to attract, learning as a tool to engage. Now, just about a couple of years back, our office infrastructure was something very similar. Our office infrastructure were meant to attract talent. Right? We had multiple facilities in offices to engage people. Now, what COVID has shown us, again, demonstrated us, is that, really where what it boils down to is really the core value and the emotional connect with employees. So value of the core values of the organization and emotional connect that managers and leaders are able to build with their people. And I think that dimension of soft skills have become very, very prominent, right? Now, and that is a very important dimension. Having said that, hard skills, again, given the fact that outcomes have to be delivered in a very different context. Each of the organizations here, I'm sure, has grown significantly in the last 2 years. The opportunity each one of them is sitting on has only grown. So clearly, from that perspective, hard skills in terms of direct business deliverables did take precedence in terms of what organizations were expecting. But similarly, managers and people who will come on board, because each one of them would have hired tons and tons of people in these last 2 years. So how do you build, firstly, how do you develop managers who have the right emotional connect and the value system connect to the organization? And how do you then, pass that on to all the fresh hires that you're bringing in?
Actually, Bimal, on that manager point, I wanted to ask Gautam and Dimple, whoever wants to take this first. But you are operating in scenarios which are highly technology driven, right? Where the person interacts with the technology a lot more with than with another person interacts. How have you enhanced the whole role of value of soft skills in your program?
So maybe if I can go first. I think what Bimal said, I don't think you can ever, the hard and soft are equally important, right? In fact, I think the soft skills part of it definitely saw some dilution or erosion in the pandemic because of the virtual situation, right? A lot of soft skills, I mentioned this earlier as well, are very often picked up through a process of role modeling and immersion, right? And also osmosis. Now, we had to bring soft skills back into an important part of the learning and development agenda. Soft skills are harder because you're tackling mindsets and you're asking people to unlearn, various approaches. In general, the software and the technology world has become so much more democratized with agile, right? So you've got a lot of things that need to be unlearned equally in the learning and in the soft skills area, where people have traditionally thought of command and control as the way to lead, etc. Now it's got to be more through empowering, influence, and inspiration, right? So soft skills, and how do you make people realize? That was one of your questions you asked, right? What we've seen every time we've exposed people to soft skill training, they've actually said, "Oh, initially there was some resistance. Do I really need it?" Now we've got people, they really want more. There's a clamor for it, right? Because people are realizing the value of the soft skills that are being imparted, and it's growing. The composition of soft skills and hard skills in the overall portfolio of learning and development is growing.
Dimple, are you seeing the same trends there as well?
Pretty similar, Andy, to what Gautam and Dimple spoke about. I think we definitely see both soft and tech skills or hard skills on the same level playing field. Soft skills, I agree, takes a bit more time to land and grab and move with, and it's hard to have an ROI around it as well. When we look at skills, we typically, in our organization, tend to look at things from the lens of how do you scale it, because we are very large and the footprint is global and all of that. So what we did last year was we came with the concept of future fit skills, which was focused on soft skills. So we came with this concept of 9 future skills globally that the organization is focused on. So create a bit of rally around it and rara around it and a brand around it as well. Every month we then focused on our skills. For 9 months in a year, started last year, we focused on one skill and we did a lot of bite-sized learning events around that skill. Bring experts from the industry, bring internal experts, bring live examples of how people have implemented or looked at the skill and why that skill is important. That was all of last year, and then we wrapped up last year. This year is all around applicability of the same skill, right? What are live examples of people or business cases within the organization, outside the organization, that are really driving the message around these skills, so that the learner can really learn from looking at others and learn from experiential learning of others, as opposed to getting into the immersion themselves, and then find the opportunity of finding the immersion through existing online solutions and online learning platforms, etc., in the university that we have inside the organization. Hard skill on the other side, the way we are going about it is that we are asking business lines to really evaluate what their skills are and where those skill competencies are needed. To the point that I was making earlier, is that how do you have, what are the jobs and roles that you have, and what are the skills that you then need for each of the job and role, both behavioral as well as technical, to be able to then create competencies and capabilities that people develop further into it and look to enhance the capacity.
No, thank you for that. Vikram, one of the things that's happening in the GCC space, as it is happening everywhere else, is the fact that while the age profile is younger and therefore there is a different kind of approach towards attitudes towards learning. Even in GCCs, you're seeing that there is increasingly a larger population that's multi-generational, people who are older and so on and so forth. Your kind of organization obviously has a lot of people who are much older as well. Are you seeing the same approach, or do the same approaches from your perspective work for all the generations of the workforce, or do you target people very differently?
And it's a good question, because initially the thought, and while I was presented to the board also, very similar view came in. However, our average age is actually around 29, which is very similar to GCC, having worked in obviously a big part of investment banking in my previous organization for a global perspective also. So very similar age profile. However, there are equally certain people very similarly which are into the other side of the Gen Zs, to a baby boomers and all that. But when we looked at the data for a 1 year, when we implemented that approach of totally personalized and a democratized whole app, which we tried to build in for a learning conduit, the good part which we saw was people, even in the baby boomers, had actually adoption rates of more than 88% continuously for 1 year, which was there. The only thing is the content utilization or consumption changed. The whole concept is around what kind of consumption is happening. So learning is becoming more like, if I were to see, like an e-commerce. It's a learning e-commerce, if I were to say. And therefore the consumption patterns may change, but the consumption adoption has equally been high. The only thing is, how do you link your content to what they have in line of sight for them? Now there is a little difference between the previous question and what we tried to do, and I'm just linking it up. So one side is your, obviously, the soft skills, one side is the hard skills. That's how we typically segregate all of this. Then there is a third which we introduce, which is a techno-behavioral skills. Now, techno-behavioral skills don't go by the word pure techno from a technology perspective. It's something like saying anything which is required on the top of the hard skills as a thin layer for making anything successful. Now, that's not only pure sales only. It's whether for a technology, whether for operation, customer service, financial, anything. So because you cannot have only hard skills unless you're only laptop to laptop or a desktop to a desktop. In case you are interacting even internally or externally, there is the thin layer of soft skills alongside. So once you attach that and make that very, very relevant from a techno-behavioral skills, you see a very high adoption, because the line of sight of becoming to what you want to achieve in the future is there. People automatically consume that thing in that way and leave the rest as redundant. And we remove those from our apps very, very fast in that way, where the usage pattern. So equally good consumptions, which is there, patterns are different.
I'll do a quick fire with all of you. We have about 5.5 minutes to go before we have to end the session. So quickly, we're starting with you, Vikram. 2 or 3 metrics that you use to evaluate effectiveness of learning for the learners. I know all of you have invested a lot more in learning. How do you measure the ROI on it?
So one is on our technical competency framework, competency behavioral frameworks. We try to take in every year the kind of a proficiency moments and wherever we are slated to do. Second thing is especially on the topics of project economies, which I touched upon. So there is a certain ROIs we have been expecting on in terms of delivery on certain things. Wherever we get that particular ROI, we actually look into that. The third is the service which we do. And there is that yearly employee service which happen. On the learning side also, we pick up around 4 to 5 questions onto that, which goes openly for every department, for practitioners in terms of what they are doing. And that becomes a good yardstick for us in terms of obviously making it better year on year. Very simple, those 3 things. There can be multitude depending on individual programs or campaigns or interventions. And those are on a broad sense, if I may say.
Dimple, your thoughts?
Similar, Andy. So I think VOC is certainly something that we look at, which is through the various surveys that are going on in the organization, through our channels of HR, tiered channels where we collect data from employees, etc. I think the second thing is open, transparent career movement and opportunities, and we're tracking that quite critically both internal to the organization and cross entities, because we have also got other entities that employees move into within HTCs. So looking at those are the yardsticks from our perspective, and getting those employees to share those stories from their perspective through, again, those existing channels. Project-based environments are also something that we're exploring in terms of creating projects, much like what we've got at Bajaj. We're exploring that as an option. It's still in test phases and beta phases, so much to see on that. But that is probably going to be the third yardstick for us in terms of how skills can be further reviewed, enhanced, and evolved.
Gautam, I'll come to you next.
So, career progression, I think Vikram and Dimple mentioned that career progression is a very clear metric to measure the success of learning and development. Role change post undergoing certain programs and acquiring certain competencies within a certain period of view of a individual, of an employee acquiring, how soon is there a job change. The other one that we've recently started tracking is that when we do have attrition, how many of those roles are filled internally as opposed to getting hired into. That again is a way of measuring the success of your learning and development, right? Because now we're looking at the two jointly. If you are developing your people, if you are imparting the right level of learning, then, if we can fill 50, 60, 70% of our attrition through inward, from within, then that to me is a very, is a critical success metric.
Bimal, my question to you is, to the other 3 of them, what would you recommend they should add to the metrics?
No, so I would recommend, actually my answer would be very similar, because that's what our customers are holding us accountable to. But I think largely customers, what I would recommend is make learning very, very core to the purpose of the organization, like very, very core to what the organization is trying to drive in terms of outcomes, growth, opportunities. Make it very, very purpose driven, make it very, very core, right? Because that's also where, at least again in our experience, the learner starts feeling empowered, right? When he or she knows that they are not learning a technology for the sake of learning, they are not learning on an app for the sake of learning, or they are not. So once they know that they are learning for a purpose, so say for example, an RPA implementation now, in the earlier avatar, somebody would learn RPA as a technology, and then he's supposed to come and implement it, right? Whereas if you make it very core to the purpose that you are doing, that an organization is doing RP implementation for an end objective, and learning is in that journey, I think that that makes the learning journey. The learner starts feeling empowered. So it's not the technology, it's not the RPA which is feeling empowered, it's not the machine learning which is feeling empowered, but really the learner, right? And hence the organization. But just two other aspects that accounts hold us accountable to is, of course, speed to deployment and then productivity enhancement.
Thank you very much for that. Well, I think I want to thank all of you for spending this time with us. I wanted to actually ask all of you as to what did you learn personally in the last 2 years. But I don't have the time for it, but it will be an interesting conversation at some point in time again in the future. But I think the important thing that I would take away from this conversation is the fact that the difference that I noticed amongst all of you have been saying is that you've been able to drive adoption both by thinking of it in a more of a design thinking mode than looking at it in the classical way we've always looked at it. And I think that's the biggest change that we perhaps have driven over the last 2.5 years. As the need for learning has increased, and as individuals have also become a lot more open to the idea that this needs to happen. Vikram, you spoke a lot about the technology part of it, which I didn't spend much time on because again, that's something that all of us have been using a fair bit. But the fact that you've created apps around it, customized it for the learner, I think those are things that are truly important for organizations. But thank you again, everyone, for joining in, and thank you, ET, for having us for this conversation. Have a very good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.